You know, it's only 2 days since the end of Poetry and Translation Month. So this could be considered a poetry and translation event that we just had.
Okay.
But it did.
Next up, we have Zorida Mohammed.
This poem is about Michael O'Brien. Monocotyledon, dicotyledon. When I first met O'Brien, he did a dance almost, as if his feet were not on the floor. Whenever I spoke, he'd say, "Write that down, write that down. It's poetry." He knew more stuff than anyone I know. We got into an argument once about oak trees and which tree was monocotyledon and which were dicotyledon. He insisted he'd won. He was a robust, big guy who could be gruff but never mean. He was generous to a fault. I wanted to whisper, monocotyledon, dicotyledon, but was afraid he'd sit up in the coffin and our whole argument would erupt. So I kept silent and thought the words. And I'm going for another one here. Crossing the German border. Crossing the German border back into Denmark, a very modest, rustic monument caught our eye. 4 narrow boards, the color of barn siding, about 4 or 5 feet tall, each bearing the name of a concentration camp, stood next to each other on a platform. Dachau was the easiest to remember. The other 3 names were long and complicated, and I did not write them down, I'm sorry to say. The Danes were observing the anniversary and had placed wreaths and flowers at the base of the boards. I stood for a picture on the platform that I later realized had been one of the train stations where Jewish citizens were collected. My sister-in-law's voice fell low when she mentioned that the Danes were also complicit. I wanted the camera to capture an emaciated body leaning a bit to one side from hunger. I held my own hands to remain steady. Who was I to stand in the presence of such unfathomable innocence and guilt? As I was stepping down from the platform, a shiny clean train that knew nothing about Dachau or concentration camps went almost silently by.
Thank you, Zorida. That was beautiful. Next up, we have one of the Gang of 5, a guy who had his own 70th birthday a couple of months ago, and we were all there to celebrate it. Let's have a round of applause for John Barrale.
Gee, 70 must be somebody else. This is on page 102. It's called Pentecost, and it's a coming-of-age poem of sorts. Pentecost. When mosquitoes bite, they bend over and show their asses. Ugly, shiny things, unmentionable, like the used condom you saw in the gutter when you were a kid. The ghost of resurrection floating by on a very hot and rainy afternoon, when just the thought of sin made you sweat. And despite all the saints and the Holy Mary, you couldn't help but look up and see her undressing in the window. Later, alone in your room, you touched yourself and watched the rain back up the sewer and the street become a dirty river. That river became a metaphor for your life. All this the month after you turned 13, and no one to save you, not even the baby Jesus, who lava-like and wingless smiled up at you from rotting loaves and fishes.
And this is called Juliet and the Bardo. It's right underneath Pentecost. The Bardo is a place in Tibetan Buddhism. It's not like purgatory. It's where souls go waiting rebirth, where they get a chance to reflect on their lives. I hope to see many of you there in a couple of years.
I think that's where we are now.
I accepted my death, my courage at the end pure, and my legs steady as I leaned into the blade. I remember a handful of flowers gathered like child warriors on the soft shoulders of the hills. Clouds like thick black horses assembled. My beloved Verona was a blur of colors. The last thing I saw. I missed the shimmering instrument of his smile, his bright paints and guitar. I long for him and wonder if he weeps for me.
Thank you.
I forgot to mention that we're having some light refreshments at our home, 165 Jackson Avenue, after the reading. It's behind Union School at the foot of Jackson Avenue. So,
Go around the circle and down Union Avenue until you get to the 7-Eleven and take a left there.
okay, and it's 2 blocks down.
That works.
Okay.
Next up, the editor of the Red Wheelbarrow, the leader of the Red Wheelbarrow workshop, the guy who likes commas as well as any guy ever. Jim Klein.
I apologize for ruining your sleep. I can't think of a true sentence that won't indict me for thinking about love all morning, hand against your hairless, warm body, and robbing you of your proper sleep. I plead guilty to those physical aggressions and to numberless unnamed acts that flirted through my consciousness as though I were a younger man or boy, or even less of an old man. The eye and the mind never age, and the imagination is always swift. And this is The Rider. This is a movie that's on Apple streaming. The Rider is a young man with a plate in his skull where a bronco stepped on him. His sister's on the spectrum. His brother is a quadriplegic. And his father is someone he doesn't want to turn into. His mother is dead. The rider can't ride in the rodeo anymore, but he does train horses. His father even buys him Apollo, and the rider breaks him and takes him for what he calls cruises in the western Badlands of Dakota. After a lot of other shit happens, He goes to look for Apollo and finds he has injured his leg. This is what I wanted to write about. These malformed people have a perfect vision of justice. If an animal like Apollo is injured, he must be destroyed because should he dream of running and kicking, he won't be able to do it because of his injury. For the first time, the rider and his father cooperate. His father tells him to walk away and whistle for Apollo until a shot rings out. A long view of the landscape shows the rider in miniature and the small body of Apollo and his tiny father holding his hat in his hand. I think his father had the rider whistle, so Apollo's last thought would be a happy one. Since the rider and his family are human, they have to persevere with their imperfections.
Thank you, Jim. Next guy showed up here and quickly took over affairs on his own. He's our IT guy. He does the field notes when the guy who usually does the field notes doesn't do the field notes.
Who's that?
I have no idea. And in every way, he's just stepped up to become a crucial part of our community. So why don't you give him a big round of applause, since that's all we got. He's Frank Rubino.
Thanks a lot. I'm going to raise this a little bit. Yeah, there we go. That's good. Okay, great. Thanks. My glasses on. Vivarium. I shook the woman's hand there and felt her fingers in the cage of her rings. And when my hand came away from her fingers, it had twisted one of her rings, a couple of millimeters away from her knuckle, and we had both noticed. I felt the spines of the diamond setting and the tilting forward of the silver band on the cylinder of her finger bone. She guided us the back way into the training room through labs. We could see tanks and other vessels as green as farm tractors, sprouting steel tubes with valves and dials. The young men where she took us were dressed plainly in plaid or madras shirts, untucked over jeans. Each of their haircuts was a frustrated concession. However, they were trying to do a good job with the mice. One of them had a new baby, and I recalled that time in my life. He looked at me through the PowerPoint projector beam, and I knew what he was feeling, that I couldn't possibly understand his loving wonder. He was saying how a mouse was chosen from the vivarium. After its head was twisted off its spine, its organs were removed from its body and cloned a bunch of times and tested with various reagents until some antibody crusted with sugar finally attached to a protein, and they could go on creating new gene therapies from its cloned tissues. Thanks. I want to say, this is a great night. I want to thank everybody on the team who helped to make this book that I was proud to be a part of. It's a great book. I want to also point out one other thing that I have in this book is an interview with our featured poet, Arthur, which is accompanied by my wife's great photo of Arthur. And as such important observations like interviewer, you have like 5 peanut poems. So I recommend you check that out as well. Anyway, thanks very much, guys. Enjoy this book, and I love all your work, and I'm really happy to be a part of this community. Thanks a lot.